I was just sitting there looking at the video of Bobby Chin and asking myself, how am I supposed to do an entrance after that? But a few weeks ago, I get a phone call from one of the great organizers, and she says, Gustavo, there isn't anybody talking about food and beverage data analytics in the panel. And honestly speaking, I wasn't very surprised, because we in the F&B industry are not necessarily pioneering and jumping into that wagon. So today, I'd like to start, first of all, with reading out a statement, which is technology and data will transform all of our businesses at their core. And I want to ask, with a show of hands, who here believes that this statement is true? So about 30% have questionable standpoints in this regard. We believe and we're convinced that this is the way forward. So I want to take a little bit of step back. Who are we? So I'm Gustavo, founder of Forsite Creative. We've actually started off from a strategic perspective, and today we call ourselves an international strategy, concept, and design firm focused on F&B and hospitality. We started off as many others, doing strategy, development, but then we felt it was inevitable to actually bring in additional complementary disciplines to be able to further offer a proper turnkey solution. And that's why we added a creative component, branding, interior design, and then a technical component, kitchen design and operational design. We've worked in roughly about 200 projects in the last 10 years, many of them here, and many of them have been mentioned before. Privileged to have worked in Kudu, which was mentioned before as an example. But now we're asking ourselves, what's next? That same agility and adaptability that we've had to do throughout the years to add all of these complementing services, we feel that data needs to become the driver of all our strategic contributions. However, what is the main common challenge that we all have today? From our standpoint, and I'm sure many of you can relate, there is a lack of access to actionable data for food and beverage decisions. Some of us are starting to experiment with it, but from this actual challenge, we actually decided to come up with Forsite Data, our fourth division in this spectrum of services and things that we're engaging in. So Forsite Data, simply said, is our technology arm that collects targeted data sets, which we then analyze using proprietary models to actually have these strategic insights. Might not be very clear to all, so what are we really doing? We have a technology arm that we can custom instruct to actually collect hundreds of thousands, if not millions of data points. And then this could be from any open platform, any open website, in any language, and then synthesize that to give us analysis where we can actually use to make strategic investment decisions or managerial decisions. This is not about a trend report, gut feeling anymore, which is the way we've been operating for 10 years. This is really, what does the data show? So what are we doing already? Simply said, we can recommend cuisines and concepts based on data. We can actually track customer movements, understand who and which kind of profiles really are going where. We can actually understand our target markets a little bit better. Following that, their sentiment. We can also understand performance overall in certain markets. We like to benchmark much more accurately now based on data, validate expansions, validate a location, validate a specific market overall, and ultimately drive management and investment decisions. So today I want to take a little bit of time to run you through 9 basic examples of how we're using data and how you could use data with the basic data sets that you may have access to. First of all, and I think Jennifer already mentioned this, we did a quick scan to show what, for example, Riyadh looked like in 2019. This is specifically showing how many relevant restaurants were already active, either with online presence or with certain mentions of them on the market. And we can also list those by, let's say, price category. And what's very interesting is that in 4 years, this has grown tremendously. We can use this to understand potentially shifts geographically of the city. Where is the city moving towards, which we know in the sense. We could filter that per price point so that you understand also for that segment, where is there more supply. But we can also see not only has there been a 5-fold growth overall, but the casual sector has doubled. The premium and high-end sector has grown by about 65%. The next thing we like is to go a little bit deeper. From 300,000 posts, roughly a little bit over, that we collected, what does that look like from a sentiment perspective? Now, from a case-to-case basis, and we're keeping it quite generic, the topics that we select, whether it's cuisine or so, etc., can be changed. But in this case, we see that predominantly the negative topic in 2019 was around staff, price points, and service efficiency. And there was already a lot coming up in then regarding atmosphere and potentially outdoor seating, because in Riyadh that's actually more important than other markets. In 2024, we see that the market is already much more demanding, much more opinionated in that sense, and there's a lot of things that are becoming increasingly important. When we see other markets, things like parking, accessibility, and reachability are much more important. In Riyadh, people would drive 20, 30, 40 minutes because there was a lack of supply, and now things are changing. Benchmarking. Benchmarking becomes also very interesting. We've taken the obvious one, Riyadh, Dubai, but that doesn't always have to be the case. We've instructed our technology to collect 100 restaurants that are perceived as expensive, and then we've collected 100,000 posts that were very data-rich. And these 100,000 posts, we try to understand what is the sentiment around some of these topics and what is also the frequency of mention. Service, of course, being super important. These are the obvious. But we can start understanding also and comparing, is it more important to emphasize on food quality, for example, or more atmosphere? Riyadh, for example, atmosphere plays a much higher role than food quality still today, and these things may change. And as mentioned in Dubai, accessibility, parking, location, these things actually will drive sentiment much more than in Riyadh as an example. Then we go into correlations, and I know this might not be very clear to everybody. What's important to take away from here is from these 100,000 posts, we actually validate whether certain investments in those pain points would actually drive positive correlation, would actually drive positive sentiment, so that we know, indeed, we should invest in that business opportunity, or we should actually invest in that management decision. And again, we run these through point by point, staff being one of the strongest positive correlations that we found across both markets, followed by service efficiency. And again, we can pick any topics of interest. Doesn't have to be one of these generic topics. We can actually go into cuisines, into investing on a hostess or multiple hostesses, design, branding, marketing, music, etc. Opa. The next thing we'd like to do is dive in a little bit deeper into a competitive set. We've picked this one because some of these are actually in the culinary tours. But let's say we take 20 restaurants in Riyadh. To go a little bit deeper now, and not stay too much at a macro level, what can I do with this data? So anybody or any online profile that has visited 2 or 3 or more of these, we would collect and then make those our target audience as an exercise. What can we know from there? The data allows us to actually understand that target audience, and we may relate to a lot. We know, and it's been mentioned today earlier, it's predominantly Saudis, 93%. Where do they come from? 85% from Riyadh, followed by Jeddah, Khobar, etc. Could have been predictable. But more interestingly, is there a variance between the male to female ratio in the different age groups? So that one becomes quite interesting over here, that above 30, actually the females drop tremendously and the males increase very heavily. In addition to that, if we exclude the 93% and look internationally, what are the countries of origin? And you can see here things such as the fact that around 50% are actually Europeans that are dining in this. This is different to the demographics that we often receive about the people who live in Riyadh, who are they? Now we're going into the people who dine in Riyadh, who are they? And let's go a bit further. Those 13,000 people, where do they go internationally to dine? And this is where it starts getting very interesting. 700,000 restaurants. We see here the locations. Interestingly enough, a lot in the US, followed by the UK and France. But if we would go into a little bit deeper to understand which ones of these restaurants are seeing more repetitively, these statistics change, and actually France is one that is extremely recurring. We don't only have to limit ourselves to where do they dine out, but we can actually increase that number. And if we look at any types of businesses that they've been to, that our technology arms allows us to find, we find 3.5 million data points. This includes shopping districts, museums, entertainment areas, etc. We can, of course, zoom into the different markets. Many of you will recognize London and the areas in London that we dine out in, similar to Paris, and so on and so on. That could be extremely helpful to validate a specific location that you're going to. Now, as I was mentioning, in terms of restaurants that get the most exposure specifically, we see that about 73% of the restaurants listed over here are actually in France. And we can see that some of these restaurants have even been visited by 20% of that targeted audience. And if we do host a market gap analysis, only some of these concepts, and funnily enough, one was being discussed today, are actually present today in Riyadh, allowing a lot of opportunities for those who are actually seeking for concepts to also evaluate what kind of exposure does this market specifically have. Not only talking about concepts, we also like to create, we like to develop. What kind of cuisines are people interested in? The target audience, and we know it and we may relate, a very meat-driven industry. It's predominantly around barbecues, meat, and grills, and then followed by some of the favorites which are also evident in the market. Those being Mediterranean, Asian, French, Italian, Turkish, in that order. These are some of the basic examples, and again, as I mentioned, where it gets really, really interesting is when we custom pick exactly based on your specific case, whether you're taking a brand and expanding, bringing it in, analyzing a location, or many other things, what kind of valuable data there, which tells me about my audience, my demographics, the age, the cuisine, their preferences, etc., can we look at? We hope that you join this transformation and avoid being left behind, as we believe this will provide a wide range, new range of opportunities yet to be uncovered. Please join the movement towards better data, and feel free to approach me or ask any questions now about data. I'd love to talk to you guys about it. Thank you very much.
Do we have any quick questions? Got time for one. Okay, Emma.
There's one there.
Hello.
Hello.
So if you have a client that comes to you, so basically they have a group of restaurants in their portfolio, and these restaurants all have active social media accounts. Even if they had no data tech stack within their business end to end that can decipher the data for themselves, you could take those social media accounts, look at the traffic, find the valued, guess, and give them detailed insights into their business. Is that what you're saying you can do?
That's what we're saying. So basically, as you know, we used to receive a lot of these requests in the past when data was not what it is today.
Yeah.
And we would do everything manually, literally hire people to go through all the posts and identify trends, et cetera, go to markets, ask questions. Our approach indeed allows us through different angles. It can be social media. Honestly, one that proves to be very rich for us is actually open platforms like Google Reviews, because a Google review would allow you to identify somebody who posted here, what their text is, what their sentiment is, and through that profile, which other places they go to, which common trends they have with other people. So yes, we would take the approach, and let's say in this specific case, a brand, we'd be able to say people who dine here, this is where they also go, this is where they live, they're happy, this is how they benchmark you with your competition. And that allows you to, evaluate your position in a specific market, or evaluate where you would want to go to a different market, and if you need to do so, how things change with regards to the market adaptability that many have spoken about today.
So.
Collecting this data, and as I mentioned, and I gave a quick example, from 20 restaurants in Riyadh, we get to 3.5 million other data points internationally, is not very difficult. What's very difficult is collecting that and then synthesizing that. And we've JV'd with a big data analytical company from the US, that actually allows us to do that in very large scale, relatively quickly, and extremely effectively for us to make decisions.
So just, sorry, one last quick. So based on what you've just said, why use you as opposed to Sprinkler, for example?
We take very much the approach of being the consultants that have had to develop this in the past, etc. And we take very much the approach of we understand concepts, design, kitchens, etc., and the pain points of many of the consultants that we've come across. And we just feel that we take a bit of a more deep approach overall. So to give you an example, we don't know anybody who would actually specifically say, in that market, the Asian food lovers that predominantly spend in casual concepts over anything else, this is where they are, and this is what our AI is detecting are the points of topics that they're mainly talking about. We haven't seen that in the market yet.
Yeah, that's all we've got time for, so a big round of applause, Gustavo. Thank you.
Thank you.